And welcome to Believe in Chargers with the great Lorenzo Neal, who apparently is an extra in an Indiana Jones style film with the rope bridge behind him. You know, hold on to that rope, man, and then
you can appreciate that.
Exactly, a little Temple of Doom style is what you got going on behind. See, it's such a peaceful, beautiful shot, and I immediately go to a 1980s action movie.
And how could you be wrong with that, though? Come on, how can you? I mean, Indiana Jones, you can't go wrong.
The great Lorenzo Neal talking Chargers here today. Not really a lot going on. Joe Hortiz did host the media yesterday. I was there it ended up going for a lot longer than I was able to stay. Unfortunately, I got that radio show. Fortunately, I have the radio show. That's great. But yeah, it ended up starting late and running late, and it was pretty entertaining. Joe kind of went through the draft process, how they grade players, how they reset after days 1, after day 2, after day 3. We can dig into that a little bit, but I want to start by thanking our friends at FanDuel. That's why we're here and looking at it right now. Here's what we got. Chargers futures. We've talked about it. They're third, right behind the Bills and the Ravens. And I think the Ravens probably being the favorite, a little bit of a product of that division. We still have no idea if Aaron Rodgers is going to be back. Who's the quarterback of the Steelers? The Browns, of course, we got Mary Kay Cabot and that idiot Shiloh Sanders getting into it on social media about Deshaun Watson or Shador and who's the quarterback there. And, the Bengals look to be a little bit frisky, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Meanwhile, the Chargers got to figure out how to navigate the Broncos, who had the best record in football, and the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. So they're plus 1,600 right now to win the Super Bowl.
I mean, you got to look at it and say AFC, just the whole AFC in general. You got to look at Josh Allen, Buffalo, but he's human. You look at Patrick Mahomes; he took a step back. Their inability to throw the long ball, their inability to spread the field, very inconsistent. Kansas City relied a lot on their defense the last several years. His offense has been missing. Denver, of course, Bo Nix, get hurt before the playoffs. Don't know. They probably would have beat New England, so they probably would have been in the Super Bowl. But he's going to be healthy, so it's just going to be just interesting. The Raiders are making a tremendous amount of moves. You got a backup quarterback in Cousins, who's probably going to start off, who's a good teacher, could help this young guy mentor. So I think the AFC West got a lot better and just got a lot more stout, a lot more, compact, but doesn't mean the Chargers still, to me, is still probably right there at the top 2, if maybe even higher. And for me, Money, it's like, Buffalo, Josh Allen, what he could do. They tried to go after defense. The AFC is, you never know who's going to. There's really not a dominant team since Kansas City, since now they're starting to slide. You really can't just say, hey, this is the team. We don't know what Houston's going to do. You just never know who can pop up, in the AFC. So I did look at that, seeing that on FanDuel. But the question I have for you is the tight end. Is the Chargers really secure at tight end? Because I saw him bring in from Cleveland. I like him, the African kid.
David Njoku.
Yeah, David Njoku, fast, runs hard. What does that say? What does that tell you?
Yeah, that one. I mean, they haven't signed him, so that tells me that probably didn't check out. He comes, he makes it. Think about Biotish. Tyler Biotish comes here. They go to dinner. They have him signed by that night. And so I think that's sort of Charlie Kohler. 5 minutes into free agency, they call him. He's signed, and he's now their tight end 1 or tight end 1A or 1B to Alrande Gadsden being the other 1A or 1B. And I think in the case of Njoku is something that we talked about with the draft, right? Like, there's all these tight ends. And this actually kind of plays into the part of the conversation that I was able to sit in the room with Joe and Kevin and kind of how they work the board and how they draft players and how they come to consensus is, remember, I should pull it up because there was a huge run on tight ends in the draft. It kind of came out of nowhere. We knew that Sadiq was going to go in the first round, right? But outside of that, we weren't sure. Okay, is Stowers the second tight end? Who's even though he's kind of more of a big wide receiver than really he's got zero blocking ability whatsoever. Who's going to be that second guy off the board? And Stowers goes at 54, and then bang, the run starts. Right. Next thing you know, the Jaguars take Borkshire, and people had him as like a 5th rounder in terms of his grade. And so so he goes at pick 56. Marlon Klein, who I was talking about at the combine when we were doing this, is someone that I could thought could be a nice dart throw in the 5th round, a guy out of Germany who didn't have a lot of football background, but was recruited by Harbaugh and his staff. And hey, maybe that could be a nice little dart throw in the 5th, like they did with Gadsden that worked out. He ends up going in the 2nd round at pick 59. The Rams take Max Clare at 61. The Bears take Sam Rush at pick 69. Oscar Delp goes 73. Kaz Merrick goes 80. And I think the Chargers are sitting there going, and just kind of to talk about that conversation that we had in the draft room yesterday, they're basically sitting there with a bunch of 6-1 grades. I'm guessing. They didn't tell us what the grades were, but that's what I'm guessing on these guys, which is like, hey, 4th, 5th round, 4th round, 6-1s. We're comfortable taking them with our 4th round pick. And these guys are going off the board in the 2nd and 3rd round. And so what I think happened was, because of that tight end run and because they are a truly best player available team, they're like, we're not going to reach, even though we could use a tight end, even though we need a little bit of depth there. I'm not taking a guy that I got a 5th round grade on in the 3rd. I mean, Eli Raridan went at 95, a guy that, out of Notre Dame is he looks great. I think he's got potential, but man, that is a heck of a project of trying to get him ready. So I think, to kind of get to your point about what's going on with Njoku, I think they probably wanted to draft a tight end, and the board just wouldn't cooperate. The board and
Understood.
where the guys were going didn't line up. And so now they're like, yeah, we could probably, just to protect ourselves. If something happens to Arande, Njoku's a guy that is an athlete and can catch the ball. If something happens to Kohler, Njoku's big enough, he can be your tight end 1, and you can make him into a Y. He's probably a little more of an athlete than a true Y, but I think he's someone that threads that needle of being able to fit. But then I think also you're probably in that interview, and Njoku's going, okay, I mean, let's see. How old is – I'm trying to think of how old he is.
He still can stretch the field. While you're looking up his age, he still can stretch the field. He can run block. He's a mismatch for linebackers, a little too physical for safeties. So you can move him around. He's a big guy. So I think what would be – I'll let you figure out the age, but what would be his price tag?
So he's 29, which leads me to think that he's thinking, I got one more contract. Can I find a contract out there? Remember last year, one of our favorite players in the draft, Harold Fannin, ended up getting drafted by the Browns and, of course, just balled out, man. I think they got him in the 4th round, the tight end out of Bowling Green. That reminds us a lot of Antonio Gates, just kind of his style and the way he plays. And Njoku ends up taking a back seat to him. He only ended up with 293 yards, 4 touchdowns in 12 games. Year before had 500. Year before that, he had 880 yards and 6 touchdowns. So he's someone that's shown he can be a tight end 1. And I wonder if, the visit was, hey, look, we like you. Charlie Kohler's our number 1 Y. Gadsden's our number 1, receiving tight end guy. They're 1A, 1B. Are you comfortable coming in when we're running some 13, and you're out there in those packages, and when you're kind of just spelling Gadsden and he may have said, no, I'm not comfortable doing that. I'm looking for a bigger role. I think I can still be a tight end. So maybe that happened. Like you said, Lo, maybe his price tag was a little bit too high. And, Njoku reminds me a lot of Kyle Pitts, where the promise has always been greater than the production. Okay. You're so excited about the athleticism. And it just, outside of that 1 year, 882 and 6 touchdowns, it's just kind of been your average tight end, like high average, 600 yards, 4 touchdowns, 650, 4 touchdowns, 650. It's kind of been that.
But Harbs knows how to get tight ends involved. You see what he did with Gaston last year. I mean, he made Gaston, a young rookie, almost darn near featured him, and the guy came through. And you know what Harbs is. He loves tight ends, and this new OC, the offensive coordinator, already talking about Amarian Hampton maybe be one of the offensive weapons for the AFC and maybe the NFL honors because of how he's going to use him. So this organization's looking at people and saying, and is this Harbs guy or is this the offense coordinator McDaniel saying, I can use him. I can get him to stretch the field. I like fast guys. So maybe this is another toy that he could probably use.
Well, I think they need a tight end. I think I think they were, like I said, my guess is they were planning on drafting a tight end. It was a really deep tight end class. I think there were guys that matched up with, like I mentioned, I thought Marlon Klein was going to be a nice swing, maybe in the 5th round. Max Clare, what felt like a really good line. If you wanted to maybe get a tight end in the 3rd, high 4th, Max Clare seemed to line up. And for whatever reason, Kazmarek, like I said, seemed to be that one guy. Okay, that's a perfect fit, right? He's more of a blocking tight end, but showed some athleticism a little bit earlier and just didn't have the opportunities because you're at Ohio State and you're not taking targets away from all those receivers. So, and he ends up going in the third. So I think that's what happened, is it just got away from him. Now, the one thing I'll say about Njoku is I almost wonder if they're like, hey, and we'll see. At the time we're doing this, Njoku has come and he has left. It's Thursday morning. I almost wonder if they just look at Njoku and they're like, hey, let's not, if this is where he's at and this is where we're at, let's reach out to Jonnu. Let's reach out to Jonnu Smith, because Mike McDaniel, when he was in Miami, and that was kind of going to be the theme of the pod today, as I went through all of Mike McDaniel's stops and tried to kind of draw a line between McDaniel and some of the players that we got here. But he ended up having Jonnu in 2024 in Miami. And Jonnu Smith went for 88 catches, 884 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Wow. I saw you lean back there, Lo.
Wow. Well, exactly. 800. Man.
Yeah. 88 for 884 and 8 touchdowns. And he's sitting out there right now as a street free agent. They cut him. See, the thing is, they could have signed him earlier because his contract was terminated, so he would not have counted against the cap. But
how old is he?
He's a guy. He just turned 30.
Okay.
So, he'll be 31 in August. So this will be his age 31 season. So last year in Pittsburgh, he ended up playing all 17 games. But you're there with Freiermuth, who's the tight end 1. So he went from 884 and 8 down to 222 and 2. The season before that in Atlanta, he had 582 and 3. So he's someone, and look, Mike McDaniel got the most out of him. Basically, more than doubled his average production.
3 years ago.
The year before, in 2024. Yeah, okay. When Mike's not McDaniel's last season in Miami, but he had him 2 seasons ago. Because remember, last year he had Darren Waller.
Yeah.
And he had Greg Dulcich out there in Miami last year. So I almost wonder if it's like, Njoku kind of fits perfect, but, Jonnu Smith fits really well for them. And last year,
probably cheaper.
Last year he made $12 million. And that was was that a 2-year deal? No, that was a 1-year, $12 million deal. McDaniel got him in Miami 1 year, 8.4. His contract before that was the Falcons, 2 years, 15. So I think, you can probably get him right into that 6.5, maybe $6 to $8 million range would be my guess. And they've got the money to spend. So that's with Njoku leaving, that's a guy I would keep an eye on. It's just an easy line to draw, right? The guy was in Miami, had a monster season with McDaniel, and he's going to be 31 this year. So you're talking about in his career, he's made $53 million. He's done pretty well. Oh. And, he's probably looking to see if he can I crank out another 10, 12 million bucks, before I get too old. And it seems like this is an opportunity for him. I mean, if I'm Jonnu, I'm like, hey, am I going to go anywhere and be a tight end 1 at this point? Probably not. If I'm going to be, a backup, I look at McDaniel and what he's done. And as I'm doing this, Lo, now look, if he has a horse, he's going to ride that horse. That's one thing that's certainly bared out when I'm going through all of his history. But, Jonnu, 88 for 884, but like I said, in 2024, he had 910 and 6 with Kittle in 2021. And then he had a nice little combo when they went to the Super Bowl in Atlanta of Austin Hooper, Levine Toilolo, and Jacob Tamme when they combined for 807 touchdowns. Each guy got like 303 touchdowns. So I think if you're Jonnu, you're like, I think this kind of lines up where I can show enough and share that maybe I can get one more contract out of it.
Yeah, and I think you can. You just talked about how diverse he is, and he knows how to distribute the ball and get guys involved, and that's what he would do. You're talking about this team under the cap, have some money to be able to play with. They're definitely in the market for a tight end. You wouldn't be bringing these guys in if they weren't. The booster depth and just guys are going to get injured. It's just the nature of this game. Guys going to get a little nicked up and hurt. So you better go in, especially the way this team is tight end driven and it's focused on the tight end. And most teams are. You see why the tight ends, there's a huge run in tight ends this year. Why? Because that tight end is the quarterback safety blanket. You look at great tight ends and great quarterbacks, you usually have a good tight end. So I think the Chargers are in the market and they're going to stay in the market. And there's some guys out there that can fit. And this team is their window of opportunity. We keep talking about it. It's open now. The Chargers have to make noise this year. It can't be barring injuries. It cannot be one and done this year. It can't.
Yeah. I mean, and they have. I just pulled up their cap while you were talking about it, Lo. They have 45.8 left, so they still got quite a bit of money. Now, like we said, there's going to be some extensions that they want to do, so they want to make sure they kind of babysit that cap number for next year. But Joe Hortiz said that Derwin, Thule, those things are coming. So I would suspect that's going to eat up a little bit. And I think, based on kind of what they were talking about and where they drafted, they feel like they got look, they're always going to tell you that they got steals, right? Like, hey, this guy was way up there on our board when he just fell right into our lap, man. And boy, but they really, I did get this, and I mentioned this the day of the draft. I mentioned this on whatever. Yeah, I think it was on Saturday at the end of the draft that I was at the building because they had their big draft party for like 2,500 fans that showed up. And so I was there doing all that. We talked about it. Yeah. But I had mentioned walking around the building after the draft and running into a couple people that they really were talking up Logan Taylor. And this was before I knew anything about him. I'm not studying old linemen that are going in the 6th and 7th round. That's just not, I'm not smart enough to know what the heck I'm looking at. And I don't have the time to dig that deep into, offensive lineman 50 on the depth chart. But that was one thing that I took away is, I ran into more than one person that were like, hey, this Logan Taylor, look out. We got to steal with this one is kind of what they said. And then you dig in and you look and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, this is a guy that has played left tackle, left guard, right guard. He's got the size. He's got the length. Sounds like he's got the mental makeup. He's team captain, that he's one of the leaders at BC and a dude that would just, hey, where do you want me to be, man? Some of these guys are trying to get drafted and it's like, no, you're not moving me from left tackle, man. I'm not getting drafted as a guard. And there's a guy that played as many games at right guard or right tackle or left tackle. And that's the kind of guy you want. So I think they're kind of excited about the competition at left guard. Whether that's going to be Trevor Penning, Jake Slaughter, who's going to try to do something he's never done in his career, and that's play guard. He's been an exceptional center. But, kind of talking through that, they just like the movement skills and talked about how they had to shift their evaluation of linemen based on what Mike McDaniel wants. Slaughter fit into that perfectly.
And Money, I don't want to keep crying over spilled milk, but as I digress a second or two for you just to go over and tell me the pros and cons when you talked about, these going to be playing guard, compare them to, the big fella that left that everyone wanted, Zion. Give me compare the pros against what do some of these guys do better than Zion, and what does Zion do better than some of these guys, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's pretty easy, Lo. It is the known versus the unknown. That is all it is. It's what do you know about Zion? He's going to be there. He's going to bust his ass. His teammates love him. And that he struggles with stunts and that he's just a tick late. And that shows, that happened year 1. And unfortunately, it kept happening in year 4. And so there's some missed assignments, there's some miscommunication, and there's some quick pressures in there. And so when you're talking, and remember, it's not just in a vacuum. It's all of that and $17 million a year is when you already have a left tackle that's the highest, not any longer because of the deal for Trent Williams. But at the time when you did the deal, highest paid left tackle, Joe Alt is probably going to shatter offensive line contracts and he's going to be up in a year when they're going to have to start talking about that extension. So when you have that, it's like, okay, are we really comfortable paying this guard this much money? We just handed a center $10 million a year. We got 27.8 here. Joe Alt's probably going to go over 35. I'm sure Joe Hortiz would punch me in the throat if you heard me say it, but Joe Alt's probably going to go over 35 million a year at tackle. So that's kind of part of the equation. And so I think they said, okay, here's what we had with Zion. Here's what we might lose if we plug in Trevor Penning or we project Jake Slaughter, or maybe Logan Taylor is exciting and really kind of jumps up. as much as we think he could. And look, it's not unheard of. It's certainly not unheard of to have a 6th rounder play guard. I mean, we just saw one in the playoffs, if I remember right. I think, yeah. Onwenu is a 6th round pick, and he might be the best player on the Patriots offensive line last year. Morgan Moses ain't that great. Will Campbell got destroyed by Odafe Owe. Onwenu's pretty good. He's a 6th rounder. So it happens. It can definitely happen. Is it something I'm projecting? No. All I'm saying is I think they're just ready to run this competition. And the idea that Trevor Penning's plenty athletic enough, he was that 6th offensive lineman, could really move. And so they're like, yeah, he'd be fine. And I think between him and Slaughter and just kind of going through, and Joe had mentioned yesterday, Joe Hortiz had mentioned that he was his blue star, that they love the makeup, that there's just certain things about guys that the way you describe your blue star is, this is someone that, even if it's on, kind of the way he described it was, it's not necessarily football. It's more all the things around the player. It's, this guy's a hard worker. This guy's a captain. This guy's incredibly smart. This guy's going to add to the room. And the thing that really kind of caught my attention that he said was, when you put a blue star on someone, you feel like they're going to get to their ceiling. Like, hey, this guy's ceiling's here, and he's got the makeup to get there. Bang, blue star. And that's kind of what they had on Jake Slaughter. And so, I mean, Lo, you can speak to it better than I can. The idea that a guy who's never played guard in his career coming in as a rookie and being able to go from center to guard. I mean, does that sound like something that's doable, or does that sound like something that's probably going to take a little bit of time?
I got Chris Dillman on the phone.
Yeah.
Here's a guy, went to Indiana and was a defensive lineman. And you come, and come doing scout. So you're talking about doing training camp, doing scout team, that you develop enough and you're going against the number ones as a scout that Marty Schottenheimer says, and we start to, people talk and say, let's try this guy at guard. And quickly, Chris Dillman, because of the attitude and the want-to, and because he's squatty body, low center of gravity, had a hell of a career. Some say close to a Hall of Fame type career.
Yeah.
Dog, a Pro Bowler, mean, nasty. So can this happen? Is this, are we talking people, oh, guys, you and Matt Money, you guys are Charger sniffers? No, this is realistic. We've seen it happen.
How long did it take him, Lo?
Couple months.
That's it.
Couple months. I mean, hell, you had Antonio Gates, a Hall of Famer, didn't play tight end in freaking college, played at Kent State basketball, Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So a couple months, so when you look at this and people are like, oh, this is, you guys are reaching. No, you'll be surprised what guys can do when they put their mind to it, and especially when they have the 1-2 and they got that dog. And you can't teach dog. You can't teach that 1-2. And if these guys have it, it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, that's great. And that's, like I said, the way that he described the blue star and sort of what they put into that evaluation and their projection is that it's exactly like what you're describing, Lo, that this guy's got it up here, he's got it in here, and certainly when you look at the movement skills, the athleticism, and how that fits into what Mike McDaniel wants to do, that's sort of went into that pick. And they mentioned, look, if we were sitting at 55, we were going to take him at 55. So the fact that we were able to trade back, pick up 2 more selections, and still take the guy that we were going to take was a huge win for us with that trade, because basically, that was the guy. And Joe had said that they really tried to trade out of 22, that they were working the phones like crazy, and they wanted more picks. They were adamant that they needed to get out of this draft with more bites at the apple. And when it didn't happen, he's like, look, it worked out for us. When we were on the phones trying to work that, 2 or 3 picks before us, we had no idea Mesidor was going to be there. And Corey was in there, who's their head of analytics, and he had kind of shared with us how they do it. They start running percentages about percentage chance based on need, based on draft history. They've got all of that pumped into a computer, and it's spitting out numbers of, hey, what's the percentage chance that Mesidor gets here? Who's left on our board? Basically, he was the last guy in that bucket. Everybody else was gone, and he was the last guy in that bucket that they really were comfortable taking at 22. And so they just assumed that he wasn't going to be there. He's like, yeah, we had it.
Where did some people have him as going as high as what? Because I remember me and you sometimes.
They thought he was going to 15. They couldn't believe that Bain slid. They were convinced that Bain was going to go top 10 and that Mesidor was a lock to Tampa. And once he got past Tampa, they were like, yeah, he's still a top 15 talent. He's not going to make it to us. And then he's like, all of a sudden, we're working the phones. Mesidor's there. And you're like, maybe I need a little bit more. Maybe I need a little bit more in this deal to trade back. And he's like, the offers just didn't line up with the talent. So they took Mesidor. But then he said word was out that we were looking to move our second and our third. He's like, and we were getting calls like crazy. So we got a pretty good feeling that Slaughter might still be there. If not, he's like, we were comfortable with 2 or 3 other guys at that pick after we traded back, but we were hoping Slaughter was there, and we ended up getting the guy we wanted at 55 by trading back whatever it was, 14 spots and picking up 2 in the process.
Yeah, it's yet to be seen, because I know we like to talk about drafts and what teams got, what scores and what grades. I think you got to put it on the pads first, and even further than that, because training camp you find out. And no, I remember going to practice, and Jim Moore talked about, hey, I was with great Jim Moore as a coach with New Orleans, and he said, shoot, practice player. They thought about cutting me, and not that I wouldn't practice hard, I didn't look as quick and as strong. You don't get to showcase some of your stuff at practice. It's different than a game. In a game, they saw, hey, look, yeah, he's not fast, but he can run over guys. He's not, he's powerful. Look at him, how he blocks. So, you never really get to know. So I'd be interesting just to see what these guys get. And it's every year we want to know right away what's great, how they're going to be. And because expectations for this Charger organization and for the fan base, this fan base is they're itching for a winner, and they see the talent. And I'll be the first to say, as Charger fans, I know we let you down. I know that we should have won at least 2 Super Bowls. And it wasn't lack of talent. It was us. It was us as players thinking you get the big head, lack of execution. In those playoff games, things change. And you got to go into a playoff game and with your mindset even higher. You got to go in there and saying, hey, this is what it's going to take. Everyone's got to be locked in. You can't have guys not locked in the playoffs. So the talent is here. Can Harbaugh get these guys execute? Can other guys on this team, other leaders on this team, get guys to play at the highest level, especially when they need it most?
Yeah, and I think one thing that we saw with the Njoku visit is that, they're planning on spending some of that money. They know that there's some areas on their team that there are probably some depth issues. As I go through it, as I got our lads pulled up right now, I think, like we said, tight end, I feel like, when you see behind Charlie Kohler and Aronde Gadsden is Tanner McLaughlin and Thomas Yasmin, it's like, they probably need one there. The left guard, I feel like, is a real roll of the dice. I think that could be in training camp, see whether or not someone like Bitonio or Zeitler or one of those guards that are out there, just all the names that we've talked about, as I'm pulling them up right now. James Daniels, Zeitler, Bitonio. I'd say those are the only 3. We've talked about Daniels a lot. He was hurt, but he was in Miami with Mike McDaniel. So if they feel like he's over the injury, I think Daniels, Zeitler, Bitonio are probably the only 3 that I see that they could call if they're like, hey, this isn't going the way we want. If one of those guys is still around in August or something, then I could see that. If those guys want to wait for a situation like that, it probably makes sense for them at this point, unless someone's going to write them a pretty big check. We already talked about tight end. Let's see, as we go through this, no concerns at tackle, not after the draft and picking up Travis Burke and signing Trey as your swing. I don't feel like there's any issues at wide receiver now. I like their wide receiver room, Ladd, Trey, and Q. We can get into this next week. I was going to I went through all of the wide receivers that McDaniel's had at all of his stops and tried to draw lines to who he's got here and how this thing could line up. But we can do that next week since we got a lot of downtime before we get anything going. And then defense, I love Barrett, man. We were talking about Barrett in that room. We've already talked about him, Lo, and how much love that defensive tackle out of South Carolina. He's going to be great, man. They were really, really excited to get him. There was a scout that was doing freaking backflips that he was their pick in the 5th. And, man, the 5th, they say 3 is the magic number. For Joe Hortiz, it's 5. When you go through his 5th-round picks, man, Tarheed Still, Cam Hart, Aronde Gadsden, and now Nick Barrett. So let's see if it can continue to line up in that magic round. But they were very, very excited about that. So I feel pretty good about that room. I guess corner's the one that, because we talked about it, Lo. We were talking about if there's a corner sitting here at 22, could you see him taking corner? We went through that when we were going through the drafts, and
Right.
I think it's just the fact that Cam's really struggled to stay healthy. But I think, Dante Jackson was fantastic last year. I think they think the world of Tarheeb, and they talked about Tarheeb. The Tarheeb was one of those going into day 3 as they kind of reset their board. He said what happens is you got grades, 5.9 grades on players. And then when you go into day 3, you look at all of those and you're like, all right, which one of these guys do we think has potential to be a different, a 6-1? Let's go through. He goes, and then you start resetting. Like, let's take this group and put them here, and that's how we're gonna attack this thing. And Tarheeb was one of those guys where they were like, you know what, let's move him up, and because that guy's and that's certainly proven out. He's been pretty darn great. So I look at that though. I just don't know who's on the market right now at corner that would make sense. Q Blue Kelly, even though he had that sensational play against the Chargers, that was a one-off. Lattimore's dealing with some issues. Snead obviously got cleared from the charges, but it still doesn't necessarily line up with kind of how the Chargers operate. But that could be one. I'm not really seeing.
Money, you're talking about the defense and the players and the personnel, what it's going to take. You look at the offense. McDaniel's is he different than what the Chargers had? Of course, more spread, high power, going to score more points. No slide against the other offensive coordinator, physical, want to get downhill, but didn't have the players to do what he wanted to do. So now when you think about offense now, we look at McDaniels, we know this offense is going to score, going to get guys, going to create mismatches like the 49ers, make you cover every blade of grass. Even though you had other D coordinators, other guys were under DC, how much different does this defense look? What do you think now with these? Is it hard to say?
No, I think it's identical. I mean, you kept every position coach. Klink is still coaching DBs, and Elston is still coaching D-line, and Roney is still coaching edge, like outside of Navarro, who retired because he wanted to, or he didn't retire. He just stepped away because he wants to be with his son, who's in high school and is, a 5-star recruit, just kind of wanted to spend that senior year with his son. So outside of that, you kept the entire staff. And if you look at Western Michigan last year, he ran Jesse Minter's system. It's identical. Like, he is, to use the term the kids use, he's a Jesse Minter stan. I mean, that's what this dude is. So it's okay. And I think when you look at what Jesse did or what Jesse combined with Joe Hortiz and Jim Harbaugh did to stack their defense is, there wasn't a lot of investment in a number one corner. He was like, no. I'm comfortable. They definitely had types. I remember when he sat with us, and we were talking about all the zone he was playing. He's like, look, I'd love to play man. He goes, I just don't really have man corners. These guys are better in zone, so I'm going to do what they do best. So I think that's kind of something that he was getting at is, I'd like to play man. I've got zone corner. And then he went out and got Ben St. Juste, and he played a little bit more man. He got Dante Jackson. He played a little bit more man. So I think if there are some corners out there that fit, and as I'm looking right now, I don't really see a whole lot. Adoree Jackson, no. Okudah, no. Isaiah Oliver, no. Melifonwu, no. I'm just doing the name thing. Sorry, I don't mean to do that. But I think I don't know. I feel like I don't know enough about who's left out there and how they would fit. But I think if you just look at what Jesse's had, he wants that pass rush, man. Make sure I got my 3 pass rushers. He got that with Mesidor. Chris O'Leary got that with Mesidor to go with Khalil and Thule. You might be a little more comfortable if you can find one more guy just in case. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Bud in his final year, but he certainly looks like he's slowed down quite a bit from his peak, and they need Kennard to step up, man. Yeah. I barely played last year, but he was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. They said he had some bone issues, some loose bodies that he got cleaned up, and that he feels a lot better, and he's been out there running around. So, maybe that's what they're looking at.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting just to see, because I know we're talking about the corners and the lack thereof to play man-to-man, like Jesse Minter said. But like you said, when you can sit back and play zone and still get after guys in that front four, and that's why you looked at what they did. They said, let's go out and get an edge rusher. And that's why you said, hey, look, if we can't play necessarily man and block guys that long, we have to make sure the pressure gets to the quarterback for this quarterback can get rid of the ball. so our zone works, so we can keep everything in front of us. Guys can break on the ball. So that's why I think the Chargers did a great job of, selecting in that 22nd pick to saying, look, we're going to go get another pass rusher. We got to make sure that we're going to make this back end is going to, if we don't get that number one corner, or if we don't get that lockdown corner, at least we have, Cleo and the other guys must be able to step up and put pressure on the quarterback. So I like what they're doing. Would it be great to get a lockdown corner? Absolutely. Will this team do it this year? Never know. They still have some money. Will they do it in a trade, before the trade deadline? We never know. How guys can get disgruntled and dishappy with the organization. So only time will tell.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember, too, is, and again, it's not a number one corner to your point, Lo, but, they really liked those two undrafted free agents last year. Nico Reed made the team. Eric Rodgers had a sensational final preseason game before he broke his leg and was out for the year. So I think they look at that and they're like, yeah, we really like Eric Rodgers. We really like Nico Reed. And so if you kind of look at it that way, I think Dean Leonard in a pinch, he's more of your special teams ace, your gunner. But I think if you kind of look at it through that lens, makes sense. Nico can play some nickel. And, yeah, I mean, that's sort of the way I look at it. I don't know, like I said, just kind of going through that list of corners that are available. I'm not really sure how much money they'd want to pay out and who they would want to go get. Dolphins, guys that Mike McDaniel had, obviously he's on the other side of the ball, but guys that he might check off. Isaiah Johnson, no. Mater, no. Sheffield, no. Melifonwu, don't think so. Already burned. Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas might be interesting. That's one maybe. And then I go through the rest of this. Monroe, Goodwin. That's just not a lot there. So, yeah, we'll see.
No
the Njoku visit, though.
This team's going to stay busy. It's off season. You got those unrestricted guys are going to be still bringing in. Guys are going to be working out. Man, like a guy that they didn't even draft. You never know. But they're going to stay busy because this is a year that the Chargers need to make hay and they need to win. So we'll see, man. It's off season. So there's still a lot of moves that are going to be made.
Yeah, as I'm just doing one quick search here before we hop off, Low, at let's see, 16 hours ago. That's still no. Yeah, I think when's this? This was Bears are now favorites to sign David Njoku on the poly market. So it looks like he probably showed up and left without a deal, and I don't think that's going to happen. So we'll see if they shift to Jonnu. To me, of all the free agents, I think those are the ones that probably line up best. Let me see. I don't know about edge. Like I said, I think they're pretty comfortable with edge. They probably want to get a look-see at Kennard, see if he's taken that jump like a Boygby did last year before they start kicking the tires on a Clowney or a Davenport or Preston Smith or one of those guys. Who else is down here? Bryce Huff, he retired. And
those guys, you don't even worry about Clowney and those guys. You don't even worry about to training camp or even there are guys you sign and when you're like, look, are you in shape? Bring them in, see how they look. Say, okay, we're gonna maybe give you a call. You don't even need those guys. Don't necessarily need the reps. Don't need to practice. You want to say, look, these are some of these guys you can sign a week after training camp. So you'll see still some moves, like you said. Let other guys get their feet wet, see where they're at before you go and bring in a veteran guy like that.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I totally agree, man. I think you hit it on the head. I think they would prefer to, we've said it before on here that Bill Parcells had the development inhibitors. That's all they are. You're plugging a hole with a guy that's average to below average, and you have no idea what you got behind him because you can't get on the field now because you got a guy whose name on the back of his jersey you recognize, even though he's not playing that great. So, yeah, well, the plan was a little bit different, but hey, this went great, Lo. You kind of started digging into it, and it worked out, and we'll get to kind of the McDaniel stuff next week. In the meantime, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I took away from the Hortiz thing. Just, I think just, I'll end with this. The overall sort of like big picture vibe that we get is sort of in step with what we already knew. And that is that Joe Hortiz is a draft and develop guy. That he is not going to be a go out and blow 70, 80 million bucks in free agency. He is someone who wants picks. He wants picks. He believes in his scouting staff. He believes in his coaches. He believes that they can find players that are going to contribute to their team in all 7 rounds of a draft. and they want those opportunities, and then they want to develop those guys to play the way they want to play and either get them to a second contract or have them playing well enough that they're going to go sign somewhere else, and it's going to lead to an extra pick for them in an upcoming draft. And that's how you get out of, sort of how you go into drafts year after year with 8, 9 picks, maybe. Like this year, they're going to have an extra 3. That's what the projection is now for Oweh, that they'll get a 3 out of it. And, now they'll have 2/3. And that's kind of the stuff that he said when we started with 5 picks. We all looked at each other. John Spanos was in there too. And he's like, we looked at each other and we're like, ain't no way we're getting out of this thing with only 5 picks. It ain't happening. So that's certainly for those of you, just put a pin in this and remember for next year, if they got a bunch of money to spend and they don't, you get all butthurt. It's just it's not the way he operates, man. He wants picks. He wants to develop the guys with his coaches the way they want to develop. And that's sort of the way they want to build a team.
Yeah. I want teachers. I want a teacher.
Exactly right. Exactly right. All right. Well, FanDuel again, 1,600 if you want to get in on it now for the Super Bowl. Plus 185 tied with the Chiefs to win the AFC West. And regular season wins over under. Look at this. It dropped, I thought. No, I think that's right. I think it was at 9.5. Yeah. 9.5 plus 105 on FanDuel right now to make the playoffs, minus 166. So they definitely think they're going to get into the postseason.
I'm going to throw some money on that 9.5. I'm going to go over that 9.5.
There you go.
All over that.
Get that over. All right. We'll be back next week. Be sure to comment, subscribe. Remember, you can get the pod wherever you prefer to procure, whether that's Spotify, Apple, you name it. It's available everywhere. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you watch it on YouTube, feel free to leave us a comment. Try to engage as much as possible, even to some of you mean people. Doesn't bother me at all. I'm happy to engage with you as well. Lo, any update on the golf? Any update on the golf? Is that up yet? Is the website up yet?
Yes, June 27th, man. We have it. We're going to be rocking and rolling. The great Money Smith is going to be there. That's all the people need to know.
Yeah, trust me.
Once you show up, Money, everyone. I mean,
if I'm your headliner, Lo,
you're golfing. By the way, you tell people I already told them they got you speaking at the PM Lounge. You got to realize, Money, you're the man. Money's like, what the hell you got me doing, Lo? You signed up for it, Money, and I'm definitely going to keep you busy on the 26th, 27th. It's going to be a great time. A lot of great guys are coming out, support, and it's just going to be a great time. I'm excited.
We'll put a link. Lindsay will put a link up in the bio here on the YouTube. So she'll put a link in the description. So be sure to click on that if you want to come hang out with us. I feel like Danny Noonan in Caddyshack when Judge Smales invited me to the party, and all of a sudden I'm parking cars. It's like, wait, what the hell happened? I thought I was getting invited to a party. Now I got to speak, and I got to grin and grip. And sorry, Matt, we couldn't find a spot for you on the golf course. But you know what? You can caddy. Why don't you go out there and caddy for Eddie? Read his putts for him, would you? We'll be back. We'll be back again next week. Be sure to check all that out. Click on that link and come on up and hang out with us in Fresno. It's going to be a great time. We'll be back again next week. Bolt up.
Bolt up.